Hey gamers! Today I'm talking about Diablo IV. You can probably guess from the title, but Diablo IV hasn't impressed me so far, and I'm going to break down why, as someone that enjoyed the first two Diablo titles. I think the main idea that I want to capture in this video is that Diablo IV just kind of suffers from having a big name that has been needing a fresh coat of paint for a while, but it's just way too scared of straying from its predecessors and legacy to actually give the franchise the fresh feeling that it needs. In this video, I'm going to break down Diablo IV into a few main categories, but also I'm going to be comparing it to Diablo II. And the reason why I'm comparing it to Diablo II instead of Diablo III is that Diablo III is a bit of a mixed bag in terms of reception, but also it doesn't really follow like the main tenets of like what I would say Diablo 1 and 2 kind of built. And Diablo 2 is probably the most beloved of all of the Diablo games. So I think it's more fair to compare it to 2, as I think Diablo IV feels more like a true sequel to 2 than any of the other games. So without further ado, let's talk about Diablo IV's story. The story of Diablo IV begins with you, a traveler, coming across a town where the townspeople ask you if you're an adventurer and essentially goad you into helping them with their little demon problem. They're having a lot of issues with like demons inside of a cave, and so you, as the brave adventurer that you are, agree to help them and slay the horrible demon that's inside of this cave. And after you do so, the townspeople celebrate you, and they even throw a party in your honor, which is very not Diablo. It's almost a happy ending, except what actually ends up happening is that the townspeople spike your drink and you end up passing out, and when you wake up, you are having these blood petals stuffed into your mouth and down your throat while you're sleeping in a sort of sadistic demon ritual. And thankfully there is a priest nearby who saves your cute little butt. And afterwards he explains to you that these people are worshippers of Lilith. Now Lilith is someone who you probably saw in the opening cutscene, but essentially she is the big bad of Diablo IV. And I mean, she's big, she's bad, she's kinda hot, and she's ready to take over the world by any means necessary. So it's up to you, the strange adventurer who can't remember who they are, but also can now, thanks to the petals of Lilith that were stuffed into your mouth, can see visions of the past, must undertake the grand task of trying to stop her. And there's a lot of characters that are involved in you trying to stop her. Like you have like the High Priestess and a lot of other minor characters along the way that end up helping you, but without going into too much detail, because again, like I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who hasn't played the game. I'm just going to give you like the highlights of my opinion of the story and how it has made me feel thus far. So I've been streaming this game with my husband over on Kick.com as my segue to kind of advertise that. So if you are interested in my streams, please check me out over there. But while we were playing it, I just kind of started to realize that the story of Diablo IV kind of lacked any higher stakes that actually made me care about any of the characters. There's like no build up to make me feel invested, and we're just kind of treated with one sudden tragedy after another. I understand that this game is kind of like a, you know, it's like Diablo 2 where it's extremely dark, like you have demons everywhere, there's like satanic stuff going on, people are being tortured and maimed and killed left and right, but I don't know, this kind of just made every side character just feel super expendable. And this was further compounded by the lack of unique personalities. I feel like every character in this game is either strangely hopeful, a total doomer, or a practical realist who accepts the world for what it is and just kind of tries to get by. Some of the side quests have interesting storylines, but they also just tend to end way too quickly for me to feel any sort of attachment to the characters. And they're more so interesting because I'm just not sure how they're going to end. There were a few side quests that we did that actually like surprised me, and I thought like, wow, like this was a cool quest. Like that's a really interesting ending to that. Over time, you begin to expect the tragedy, and so the surprise of it just kind of like floats away. You're like, oh, he's probably gonna die at the end. Oh, I saved this guy, like this guy that had his eyes removed from him and stolen. I gave him his eyes back, and as soon as he tried to put his eyes back in his sockets, he died. Like, that's crazy, you know? I definitely didn't expect that. I don't think Diablo 2, if I remember correctly, had that interesting of like quests or stories either, but at the same time, like Diablo 2 just had like such a feeling of despair around it. And like at the time, Diablo 2, when it came out, it was the year 2000. So like the expectations for games were a lot lower back then. And I just feel like if you're trying to make a modern day Diablo game, you need to be thinking a lot more about like how you're presenting the story and the side quests and all of that stuff, because it's just not enough to have like a romp through a top-down RPG anymore. And a lot of Diablo 4 just ends up feeling antiquated. Like this could have come out like 23 years ago and we'd be like, yep, this is a game from 2000. And I think you'll see that through a lot of the rest of the review. So again, the story, don't really feel attached to it in any way, so we're just going to move on to the category of monster variety. Now I have some statistics for you guys. One of the things that I started to notice while I was playing the game, and that my husband kept bringing up, but I was like hopeful that it would improve over time, is the lack of monster variety. Apparently, after doing my research and counting, because I had to physically count, there are 16 different base monsters that I could find on the Fextra Life Wiki, which is a wiki that I use for a lot of different games. I was surprised that they had pages on Diablo 4, but from just counting, it looks like there's only 16 different base monsters. It looks like the Extra Life Wiki is kind of like lacking some listed out like base monsters. Like I didn't see any of the spiders or anything on there, or the lizard men. So to be generous, I'm gonna say there's probably about 30 different enemies in the game. And I'm being very generous in saying that. Even if there are 30, okay, that still leaves a lot to be desired, because through a lot of the first part of the game, it feels like you're just kind of killing the same stuff over and over again. And even the biomes themselves, like, we'll get into environment variety later, but like, you know, you're in some of these like environments, like the snowy environment at the beginning of the game, for a very long time. And after a while, you start to think like, how many goatmen can I feasibly kill before I start to lose my mind, you know? And I think that feeling is compounded by the fact that if we look at Diablo 2, there are 71 different base monsters in the game. And so I think it's like kind of disappointing, especially considering the main tenets of Diablo. Like even if the story stinks, right? The main point of Diablo is to just run around like murdering things. And if you're just murdering the same things, like it gets kind of boring, right? I was really disappointed with the monster variety, and I feel like they could have done so much more. But that brings me into the next grievance, I suppose, I have with the game, which is the weapon and armor variety. Now, this is actually a bit of a closer like race between Diablo 4 and Diablo 2. If we look at from my research, again, a lot of my research is like a bit like up in the air, because like a lot of these like guides and stuff are still being written. It seems like a lot of websites are very like aware of the different armor sets that are available. And so I'm going to assume that it's complete. But from what I could tell, in Diablo 4, there are 57 sets of armor total. There are 31 sets that can be worn by all classes, or, you know, normal sets, and 26 unique class-specific sets. So those numbers are actually pretty good. So if we compare those to Diablo 2, Diablo 2 only has 48 armor sets total. It only has 15 normal sets, and it has 33 unique class-specific sets. Now, this isn't counting in Diablo 2 like all of the different like rarities that all the different like, you know, and neither is it for Diablo 4 that armor can come in, like armor variety in terms of like the rarities, because like again, I think what I'm really getting at is like these pieces look different, like they're unique to each other, right? But in doing some further research into Diablo 4's armor sets, because I was like, wow, those numbers are actually better than Diablo 2, I come to find out that Diablo 4 actually only has 38 obtainable armor sets, because 17 of those available sets cost real money in the shop and are cosmetic only. So that brings down the actual total of unique class-specific sets in the game down to only 20, which Diablo 2 has 13 more unique class-specific sets. A game from 2000 has more unique sets in the game than Diablo 4. And, you know, obviously, like, I don't care that much about cosmetics being in the game because, like, at the end of the day, it doesn't affect the gameplay. But that's the problem, is that it doesn't affect the gameplay. And so you're buying it simply for how it looks. And that means that there's probably, as a pyro sorcerer as I am, there's probably only 1 or 2 armor sets that are actually like end game armor sets for the pyro sorcerer. And that's kind of disappointing, because like I don't want it to be like, oh, if you get this set, like you're done, you know, like it doesn't play into other people's play styles, and like it means that everybody's going to be built the same, you know? And in a multiplayer game like that, like, that's not fun. Like, I want to have fun, like, building my character how I want to. So we're going to get more into that later, but let's move on to the weapons. So with the weapons, from what I could tell, okay, again, this is me counting on a wiki. In Diablo 2, there are 30 different axes, 22 bows, 6 clubs, 10 crossbows, 11 knives, 12 hammers, 5 javelins, 5 guitars, 11 maces, 4 orbs, 17 polearms, 12 scepters, 15 spears, 15 staves, 42 swords, 5 throwing weapons, 12 wands, okay? And these are all unique weapons. They all look different. They all like have different like abilities, etc. That is 234 unique weapons. 229 if you don't want to count the throwing weapons, because I know like that can kind of be seen as a consumable. But 229 unique weapons in Diablo 2. You want to know how many unique weapons Diablo 4 has? 25 total. Now, obviously, I am excluding entirely, like, normal weapons, right? Like, weapons that are just kind of, like, whatever weapons. But because, like, you get those dropped all the time, and half the time you're not wearing them. Because, like, in Diablo, right? Like, the second you get your first gold item, you're hanging on to that gold item for like ever, you know? You're hanging on to it for a really long time until you find something orange, or like, you know, you might happen to hang on to it so long that you find a blue item that's better. But it's very rare in Diablo you're wearing like gray items or items that don't really matter. And so like, I'm just saying, what have they done? They haven't, I'm at a loss of words, specifically on the weapons. That's crazy. That is crazy. And again, it creates that environment of every single person, everyone and their mother is going to have the same exact character build. No one's going to look or have anything different than anyone else. And that's boring. That's boring. Getting loot is just not as fun, okay, if I'm seeing the same stuff drop all the time. Like, that's just, nah, you know? Let's move on to another topic, but just as adjacent, which is the skill variety. Now, skill variety in this game is a unique topic because, like, Diablo 2 only had a few buttons, just like Diablo 4 has, right? You had only a few buttons. Your skill tree, like, you would only like build into like a few different skills. And honestly, the meta for Diablo 2, like when you're leveling and stuff like that, is to just pump one skill over and over, and then that skill like becomes your kill button, right? And you just build all the other ones like over time, but you pretty much pump one skill and then that's like your kill button for the game, right? Which again, in 2000, that kind of like unbalancing was like pretty chill. Like, you know, again, the point of Diablo was just to kill things over and over. It was like a top-down doom romp, you know? So you're like, whatever, like, kill button, yeah. But like in Diablo 4, like we're 2 games later, why am I doing the same thing? I'm doing the same thing in Diablo 4 that I was doing in Diablo 2, which is pump one skill. That's my kill move. We're done. You know, I don't have to like do anything else. Like I literally chose, like, because, you know, again, I'm a gamer. I'm gonna think of the most optimal thing I can do. And as a pyro sorcerer, my brain was like, oh, I know which kill button I want. I want to pump my my fire shield that goes all around me so that anytime an enemy is near me, right, I have that shield on, but it's also killing anything that's trying to touch me. And it is so dumb how good it works, and it just makes the game like so much easier. I will say, like, there is definitely difficulty in this game. Like, I've died like multiple times, right? But as I'm like building my character and adding skill points and all that stuff, I'm dying a lot less. And I'm not even halfway through the game yet, and I just feel like I'm so like OP. And I'm not even playing on the lowest difficulty, by the way. I'm playing on like, you know, the veteran difficulty, because that's the only one that's like available to me right now. I can't play on any of the higher difficulties. And I'm just like, damn, like, this is kind of stupid. And honestly, playing on the higher difficulties, I don't even know if I'm gonna want to do that, because the game is just so like samey, you know? Like, I'm going through, I'm seeing the same weapons, the same armor, I'm using the same skills. Another thing that I think bothers me about the skills in this game is that I think that Diablo 2 like was so limited in its skills that like something like Diablo 4 that's coming out 23 years later should be looking to other top-down RPGs for inspiration on how to do the skill tree. Because what I actually wanted to see is that, like, oh, I picked a sorcerer and there's all these different branches. I wonder what would happen if I created like a pyro, like electric, or like an arcane ice sorcerer, combining the different branches and creating unique combinations, you know? But that's not what we're getting. We're not getting that encouragement to experiment. What you actually see when you start getting into the skill tree is that it's very much like focused on like a single element. You know, it'll be like, oh, you're already going down the pyromancy route. Here's all these other skills that bump up your pyromancy. And so what ends up happening is that the player is incentivized to stick down one branch and never stray from that branch. And I think that that's kind of boring, because again, like, I have the ability to spec into some of these other like skills and use some of them, but at the end of the day, there's no point to, because that would be suboptimal. The optimal thing is to choose a path and stick with it. So that's another thing that I kind of found very disappointing. I would have liked to see like some sort of like, you know, where all the different branches have some way of like working together, you know? And I think something like Path of Exile did that extremely well. Their skill tree system was so vast. It was beautiful. Every time I spec'd up in that game, I was like, wow, I have so many different things that I would kind of want, right? And I think that that's beautiful, because it creates like this experimentation. You almost want to like try different builds or try something funny, you know? Like you might spec into something that no one's like spec'd into before, something that's super suboptimal, and challenge yourself to play like that, right? But Diablo 4 isn't that complicated, and I find that a bit disappointing. To go into our next topic, since I spent so much time talking about the skill variety, environment variety. Now, there are a few different biomes in the game. We have the Fractured Peaks, the Skaz Glen, the Dry Steppes, the Hawazar, and the Kyrgyzstan. They all have their own like unique biome and environment with enemies. They have unique looks, but the problem for me in trying to make the game look as hellish as possible, what they've actually done is stripped Diablo 4 of any like actual character. Now, I know Diablo 2 and 1 were a bit drab in their color schemes because, like, you know, I mean, graphics were limited at the time for 1. 2, they wanted to make sure you knew this is a dark game. With its dark gothic themes and, like, satanic imagery, etc. However, I think the issue with Diablo 4 is that as a 3D game with, like, you know, all these different areas that are supposed to be unique from one another, with this drab color scheme, what you end up getting is a sea of brown, almost like some of the older Call of Duty games where it's like, oh wow, every single area of this game looks the same. That's kind of how it feels in Diablo 4 too. Like, once you get away from the snow, right, because the snow is a big part of the game, once you get away from that, you know, you have like the beach biome, but I can't tell the beach biome apart from the desert biome very well, aside from the types of enemies I'm fighting, because it's still like, you know, freaking sand, like it's brown. Same thing with the dry steppes. I think the dry steppes look very similar. The 5 distinct regions just don't feel very distinct. Again, it all kind of like muddles together as this one brown blob, and I really don't like that visually. I feel like we were there for a very long time in gaming, and I'm just so sick of it. And I think part of this like drabness and the environment variety also comes down to like their lack of experimentation when it comes to different colors, because I think they've kind of like had this thought of like, oh, Diablo, right? Like the demons are red. And so like now everything that you're fighting is kind of red, including the ghosts for some reason. And that's just kind of boring. Like you know, part of playing a game is like seeing like, I don't know, visual uniqueness. And at this point, I'm fighting a bunch of things and I'm not even looking at what the things are. Just if it moves, I shoot kind of mentality. And that's kind of boring, you know? I wish they had done a lot more visually to make things like pop and for things to stand out and for your eye to be drawn to certain things. And that just doesn't happen. I mean, even some of the NPCs, like I talked about in the story, that I was like, I have no reason to like feel attached to these people. They all kind of look the same too. And so I'm getting a lot of them confused because I'm just like, wait, who are you again? I don't remember you. Huh? And that's not a feeling I should be having, you know? Like I've played games like Divinity 2, etc. that like their characters, I'm like, yep, I know who this character is. I've seen them before. Diablo 4, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you if I've seen any of these people before. And that's kind of not good, I would say. I want to add one last thing to the lack of visual variety, which is the dungeons. Now, the dungeons do feel a bit varied in their environments. Sometimes you're in a cave, sometimes you're in a dungeon, sometimes you're like kind of whatever. But once again, it just kind of feels like a big old maze. You go in there. A lot of the times they're way too long. And you're kind of just like, okay. Especially the story dungeons, way too long. Way too long half the time. Like, I'm like running out of space in my inventory and I'm just like, when is this thing over? When do I fight the boss? Like, there's just so much trash in the way. And I don't like that. Like I said, I'm a fan of these kinds of games. You know, I've played Path of Exile, I've played Divinity, I've played a lot of the older like top-down RPGs like Icewind Dale. Like, I am a big fan, okay? And so with that said, like with dungeons and things like that, like I just, you know, I have a higher standard, and I want to feel like from start to end, even if I'm like sitting there clicking, you know, I want to feel like my time isn't being wasted. And it just feels like these story dungeons just go on for way too long. And I'm like, when is it over? I'm done with this. So, and it's not even like it's because it's hard or something. I'm just like, dude, like does this thing go on forever? I found myself thinking that like constantly in some of these story dungeons. But with all of that said, that was a whole whirlwind of negativity. I do want to talk about the things that I did enjoy about Diablo IV. So the combat of Diablo IV is actually very fun, even though, like I said in the skill variety thing, like you end up pumping one skill. That doesn't mean that you pump one skill and you kind of just kill everything and it's like super easy or whatever. Like I've definitely died at times because like in the combat of Diablo IV, specifically with bosses, but with some of the trash too, you have to be careful about like stepping in an enemy's attack, right? So you're doing a lot of dodging. You're having to learn. It almost feels like a top-down bullet hell at times, which I think is very, very fun. So that part of it is kind of carrying the game for me, is that combat, because I do think that the flow there is very, very fun. The other thing that I like about Diablo 4 is that it's very easy to just get on and play with your friends. This is a really good co-op experience. Like I said, I was playing it with my husband, and I've had no issues with like connectivity or anything like that. Like it's a good co-op game. It really is. So props to them for that, because like, you know, there's not a lot of good co-op experiences out there, and I think that this is one of the good ones. And then lastly, the other thing that I really like about Diablo 4 is the potion crafting. That's something that I don't think a lot of people have mentioned, but there are like different potion buffs you can make, as well as increasing the efficacy of your healing potion. A lot of the other like armor upgrade systems and stuff like that are really easy to understand right off the bat. I think a lot of these kinds of games kind of overcomplicate their crafting system and their upgrade system to a point where I'm like, oh my god, I don't want to deal with this. But Diablo 4 is extremely easy to understand. So overall, what would I rate Diablo 4 on a scale from 1 to 10? And based on the title, you might already guess. I mean, I give it like a solid 5. Am I gonna beat the game? Yeah, I'm probably gonna beat the game. But I don't know, maybe I'll get bored before I even get there. But so far, there's a lot of reasons to get bored with Diablo 4, and not the least of which is the fact that so many of the items in the game have been relegated to cosmetics instead of like actually being in-game lootable items. And I think that that's a mistake, because again, the core gameplay of Diablo, the reason you play Diablo is to kill hordes of enemies and get that sweet loot. And if I feel like that loot isn't sweet, I think I'm gonna keep playing it and probably beat it, but I do think it's a mid game. Like, I wouldn't call this one a contender for Game of the Year by any means. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments. I would love to hear some other perspectives on the game. If you've gotten to max level, I would love to hear your perspective, because I don't know what the late game is like quite yet. But yeah, let me know down in those comments. And once again, if you're a fan of watching other people play games, I stream myself playing games over on kick.com/ScarletRain, so please check me out there. I've been moving over to Kick more and more, so yeah, if you hang out on there, hang out with me. Other than that though, please like the video and subscribe if you like these kinds of videos. I make videos like this every single week. I make like one larger video a month, and then my weekly videos are usually more like commentary based. So yeah, if that's of interest to you, please subscribe. As always, I'm Scarlet Rain, the gaming vampire, signing out. Peace.